Okay, tonight we're gonna do something special. Not really, just investigating a claim from Kurtosis and his video that someone wanted to ask me about. So, I thought I would strip some of the context from Kurtosis' video. Not all of it. Let's watch a bit of it to see his end results, and then we'll go check. Let's see what he claims.
Don't wander off, we're going to need you.
Jon says that this is pretty much exactly the same.
Sorry about that. I have animal dysfunction trying to go after stuff. Technical difficulties. Life with cats. Ain't I right? Okay. The same as the first act in New Vegas. And we will see what he's comparing is. Well, let's just get to the claim after we check what he says. So, first act in New Vegas. However, there's a far bigger issue here. Creed is going off on a tangent. So, let's check the facts. What does Jon actually say?
Most people want to talk about is the plot. I've never fully understood the hate here either. At a high level, as I discussed earlier, key information about the world is unveiled as it becomes relevant. Slowly
Yeah, I'm starting a little bit early.
expanding the story from a personal one into one where you're a key figure that deals with major factions, which strikes me as somewhat similar to New Vegas' structure of hunting down the chip in Act 1 and through your actions in that hunt coming to the attention of major players in the world who therefore want to deal with you going forward. But some
Okay, I see no problem with that statement.
people seem to have a real issue with the structure of Act 1 in Fallout 3, the story of leaving the vault and tracking down your dad. To revisit Hbomberguy's well-known critique,
Okay, here we come. How does he relate the Act 1 structure to Hbomberguy's? How does he relate this point to this point here? So, he's going off on a tangent himself. Let's see if there's a connection here.
he dislikes how you move around the game world, running into major players and factions as you go, walking from clue to clue, the overarching story boiling down to, and I quote, "You're still following this one guy's trail." Again,
Boiling down. Okay, simplified version. Yeah, you could say it's a straw man. Not gonna argue with that. Straw man.
clue to clue, the overarching story boiling down to, and I quote, "You're still following this one guy's trail." Again, I find this an odd criticism because I've never seen anyone hate on New Vegas' first act.
Okay, here's the connection. So, he's taken a quote from Hbomberguy's video. He simplifies it. It could be considered a straw man. I have no objection to Creed calling him that. Could be considered a straw man or just taking one individual quote and conflating something else out of it. Let's see. He's trying to apply it to New Vegas. He's taken just this one point from Hbomberguy and just trying to apply it to New Vegas. Okay.
Even though it's pretty much exactly the same. You spend the first act trying to track down one guy who you can run straight to if you know where you're going and how to get there, but most players will be following the road from clue to clue, running into major characters and factions on the way. Weirdly, Hbomberguy's video even takes a moment to call out the GNR, where you can choose to skip a quest if you can pass a skill check, thereby missing out on content, as if the exact same thing didn't happen in Novak, where the entirety of the retcon test site can be
Yes, but it's not a one-to-one comparison. Hbomberguy was making a comparison between Fallout 1 and Fallout 3. I didn't exactly like that comparison, but I'll have to wait until I get to Hbomberguy's video for that.
skipped by just breaking into a single terminal in the motel. But let's move on to a higher view of the plot, because Unquestionably, Fallout 3 post-Tranquility Lane is weaker than Fallout New Vegas post-Benny.
Okay. He stated Fallout 3 post-Tranquility Lane is weaker than Fallout New Vegas post-Benny. I find that acceptable. Let's go here.
But it's not just the way you're led around or the poor visual design of the world. No, Fallout 3 is geometrically wrong, and we're going to show our working. Have you packed your protractor? Because I didn't. Can I borrow yours? In open world games, players can theoretically go anywhere right away, but designers, at least decent ones, do their best to set out a path and give you a sense of direction and progression. This applies also to side quests. While optional content that doesn't affect the main story is fine, there are good and bad ways to put this stuff into the player's view. In Fallout 1, when you're looking for the water chip, you start off with literally one thing on your map, just like in
This really has nothing to do with Fallout 3 or even Jon's argument. I mean, yeah, it was wrong. It was probably a mistake to make this comparison for Jon.
in 3.
We marked your map with the location of another vault. Not a bad place to start it.
So, you head in this direction. But what's this? That's right, on your direct path to your objective is Shady Sands, the first populated area. Do you see what the game's done here? The game has given you one place to go, but on your direct route you could go wherever you want, wander around, but with just this one location, you've actually been shown 2 places to go. On top of that, you actually can't get into. Luckily, you now know of somewhere where you might find.
I'm skipping this because it really doesn't matter. This has nothing to do with the argument Jon is bringing up. There really is no context that really needed to be brought up in this. I'm just getting to the part.
You go there, you see you need one, and then it's up to you to find it. This establishes a very important narrative and thematic throughline. You're told to do something. What you have to do is not going to be obvious. Use your head. You find the lower levels have been completely destroyed, and you're going to have to search elsewhere. None of the people in Shady Sands have probably ever seen a computer in their lives. You have to find your own leads from here.
That is correct. The ignorance of the post-apocalypse. Most residents of the post-apocalypse probably can't read.
Here on out. The game doesn't hold your hand, but it nudges useful options into your path. Finding out where one is and figuring out it's a free-form journey where there's always an objective marker. It's a free-form journey you venture on yourself. Compare and contrast with the search for your dad, where there's always an objective marker pointing to your next breadcrumb, which will.
Okay, yep. Here's the breadcrumb claim. Okay, let's go back.
Discussed earlier, from a personal to New Vegas' structure of hunting down the chip in Act 1, attention of major players in the world, Act 1 in Fallout 3. The story of leaving the vault and tracking down your dad. To revisit Hbomberguy's well-known critique, he dislikes how you move around the game world, running into major players and factions as you go, walking from clue to clue, the overarching story boiling down to, and I quote, "You're still following this one guy's trail."
Okay, that's the quote. Let's see if we can find it in this video.
Tell you where to go next, marked on your radar of course, until you find him. There's no actual adventuring for the player to do. The story's so unengaging and requires so little effort and you go off to mess about with Tenpenny Tower or those vampire guys.
This is just an opinion, one that I disagree with heavily.
Fallout 1 always makes you feel like you're the hero on a while handing you places to look in an order of increasing complexity and danger based on where players are most likely to go next in their mission. It's freeform and yet always on your guard for someone who might happen.
This is like information overload on both sides. You're taking this one clip from Jon's video and you're just throwing all this pretty much rhetoric praising Fallout 1 and not giving proper context to Fallout 3 in my personal opinion.
To be able to help. So you check out and there's a dude called Gizmo, which is a little weird and I think he seems like a nice person. People into it.
Yes, it had. being made in the 90s before games went mainstream and before freaking games took so much data to actually, and so much programming. The Fallout 1 and 2 much easier to program than something like Fallout 3. Fallout 3 much easier to make comparison to some of the newer gen games.
Let's contrast with the first town in Fallout 3. You go to Megaton because your game's objective marker tells you to. You walk into a bar and...
Here, Hbomberguy is strawman in Fallout 3. He hyped up, he praised Fallout 1, and Jon really should have called this out instead, but...
a man says, I knew your dad and I'll tell you where to go if you do it. The most freedom you have in your journey to see your dad, instead of the option, after that you go to Galaxy News Radio and see Three Dog.
Okay.
Because that's where the objective...
Okay, this is the quote. Okay.
You're going and how to get there, but most players will be following the road from clue to clue, running into major characters and factions on the way. Weirdly, Hbomberguy's video even takes a moment to call out the GNR, where you can choose to skip a quest if you can pass a skill check, thereby missing out on content, as if the exact same thing didn't happen in Novak, where the entirety of the retcon test site can be skipped by just...
Okay, I don't like this. He's comparing 1 to 1, but I do understand it. He's definitely... many a true nerd, Jon is definitely rather amateurish when it comes to freaking argumentation, and definitely shows. He also, 2018, this was 2 years before, this is 3 years after, so there is certain things that have evolved, and this is Jon's first attempt. It's full of problems and flaws, but it definitely does have its issues.
Pass a skill check, thereby missing out on content, as if the exact same thing didn't happen in Novak, where the entirety...
You go back again.
Weirdly, Hbomberguy's video even takes a moment to call out the GNR, where you can choose to skip a quest if you can pass a skill check, thereby missing out on content, as if the exact same thing didn't happen in Novak, where the entirety of the...
Okay. Jon isn't addressing, this is definitely a whataboutism here. I will agree with that assessment. Yeah, it is a problem with this video. We still haven't gotten to the main claim.
The retcon test site can be skipped by just breaking into a single terminal in the motel. But let's move on to a higher view of the plot, because unquestionably, Fallout 3 post-Tranquility Lane is weaker than...
That's it. How much time? So I guess Kurtosis believes that Jon should have put more context in this instead of leaving it out. It sounds about right.
From a personal one into one way.
Okay.
You're a key figure that deals with major factions, which strikes me as somewhat similar to New Vegas' structure of hunting down the chip in Act 1, and through your actions in that hunt, coming to the attention of major players in the world who therefore want to deal with you going forward. But some people seem to have a real issue with the structure of Act 1 in Fallout 3, the story of leaving the vault and tracking down your dad. To revisit Hbomberguy's well-known critique, he dislikes how you move around the game world, running into major players and factions as you go, walking from clue to clue.
Okay, let's go back to this.
Marcus says, and then eventually Three Dog tells you he knows where your dad went. But first, would you like to do an optional quest for me? No? Oh, alright. So you go to Rivet City. They say he went somewhere else. You go there, you clear out the mutants there, your objective mark takes you...
If you are worried about the story, don't be. It's very well structured.
Which brings me to the game's biggest single narrative and gameplay problem. Your dad is the main character for most of it.
This is a dog shit argument. Period. Okay.
Doing his own thing for his own reasons. All the game's truly big decisions, the decision to abandon his life's work and raise his son, the decision to leave and try again, the decision to kill himself in order to prevent the Enclave from taking over, you spend too much of this game watching your dad have a much more intricate story. So, I'm also here
It's time.
God damn it, Janice! What did I tell you about walking into tables in the middle of a fucking cutscene? The real main characters are talking here! But even when your dad dies, you're not left to pick up the pieces and make things work for yourself. Dr. Lee immediately takes over and starts giving you the orders for where to go next.
We've got to evacuate now. Don't wander off. We're going to need you.
This guy knows what's up. Mate!
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Such great humor, Hbomberguy, just intermixing it between it. Okay.
Lions! I know.
It isn't just an optional dialogue. You get involved with Fallout is incredible. Let's contrast with you walk into a bar and a man says, the most freedom you have, instead of the options put in your... After that you go to Galaxy News Radio and see Three Dog, because that's what the objective marker says, and then eventually Three Dog tells you he knows where your dad went. But first, would you like to do an optional quest for me? No? Okay, well he went to Rivet City. Alright. And you go off to mess about with Tenpenny, where there's always an objective marker pointing to you. Now it's just you, the wasteland, and finding out where one is, it's a free-form journey where there's always an objective marker pointing to your next breadcrumb which will tell you where to go next, marked on your radar of course, until you find him. There's no actual adventuring for the player to do. I think this is why a lot of players ignore the story for a lot of their time playing the game. The story's so unengaging and requires so little effort or thought on your part that your brain sort of slides off it and you go off to mess about with Tenpenny Tower or those vampire guys Fallout 1 always makes you feel like you're the hero on a journey by straightforwardly putting the onus on the player to connect the dots. Luckily, you now know of somewhere where you might find. You could go wherever you... In Fallout 1, when you're looking... This applies also to side... But designers, at least, have you packed your protractor? It's also the one place in the game where you can actually talk to a mutant. Imagine if you could do that with more. But designers, at least decent ones, do their best to set out a path and give you a sense.
The overarching story boiling down to, and I quote, "You're still following this one guy's trail."
Oh, I must be stupid. I keep on...
Of direction and progression. This applies also to side quests. While optional content that doesn't affect the main story is fine, in Fallout 1...
We marked your map with the location.
So, you head in this... Do you see what the game's done? You could go wherever you want, but with just this one luckily, you now know of somewhere where you go there, you're told to do something, or go somewhere. What you have to do is not going... You find the lower levels have been complete. None of the people in Shady Sand... The game doesn't hold... Now it's just you, the wasteland, and, hopefully, somewhere. Finding out where one... It's a free-form journey you venture on yourself. Compare and contrast with the search for your dad, where there's always an objective marker pointing to your next breadcrumb which will tell you where to go next, marked on your radar of course, until you find him. There's no actual adventuring for the player to do. The story's so unengaging and you go off to mess about with Temper. Fallout 1 while handing you places. It's free for always on your guard for someone who might happen to be able to help put some pieces of the puzzle together. For example, after you've discovered so you check out and there's a dude called Gizmo who runs a casino, which is a little weird. Oh, I think I already have. He seems like a nice person. Holy shit, obviously you help out. Next thing you know, you're... No. Do you see what the game's done? You've reached a point where it's badass, and the side quest is not only entertaining and fun side content, but despite there isn't just an optional dialogue choice where you ask, you get involved with the story of this town. Fallout, despite being made in the 90s before is incredibly good at getting people into it. Let's contrast with the first town in Fallout 3. You go to Megaton because your game's objective marker tells you to. You walk into a bar and a man says, I knew your dad.
No wonder he simplified it. Okay. Yeah. He definitely simplified it. So how's this wrong? This is the optional
But
quest.
first, would you like to do an optional quest?
Let's go back here.
Again, I find this an odd criticism because I've never seen anyone hate on New Vegas' first act, even though it's pretty much exactly the same.
Yeah.
Discussed earlier, key information about the world is unveiled as it becomes relevant, slowly expanding the story from a personal one into one where you're a key figure that deals with major factions, which strikes me as somewhat similar to New Vegas' structure of hunting down the chip in Act 1 and through your actions in that hunt coming to the attention of major players in the world who therefore want to deal with you going forward. But some people seem to have a real issue with the structure of Act 1 in Fallout 3, the story of leaving the vault and tracking down your dad. To revisit Hbomberguy's well-known critique, he dislikes how you move around the game world, running into major players and factions as you go, walking from clue to clue, the overarching story boiling down to, and I quote, you're still following this one guy's trail.
There's not much actually when he gets into Fallout 3.
Quest for me? No? Okay, well, he went to Rivet City. Alright, so you go to Rivet City. They say he went somewhere else.
So a straw man of a straw man. That's all I gotta say. You could consider all this. This is factually correct, but just dumbed down to enough where I think it's a straw man of a straw man. Jon, straw man, a straw man. That's my personal assessment of this.
Again, I find this an odd criticism because I've never seen anyone hate on New Vegas' first act, even though it's pretty much exactly the same.
This is weird.
Clue to clue, the overarching...
This is an interweaving of Hbomberguy's video along with, let's see, a point that...
If you are worried about the story, don't be. It's very
Which brings me to the game's... Your dad is the main character for me. The decision to abandon his life. You spend too much of this game watching your dad have a much more intricate... I'm also seeing the real main characters of talk. Dr. Lee immediately takes over.
Don't wander off. We're going to need you.
This guy knows. Mate!
Lion!
I guess I'm also here. Who gives the triumphant speech?
Pride! Move out!
Hey guys, how's it going? The biggest effect you can have on...
Well, not quite sure what you're saying, Sacred G. Which Fallout game are your opinion? Sorry, not sure what you're saying with that comment. If you don't mind my asking which Fallout game, in your opinion, which one's better?
The final mission is, if you bring an...
Probably New Vegas if you had to grill me on it. But Fallout 3 comes in second. Biggest effect in the final mission is if you bring it out.
ally in with you. Lions can't get past them and it takes longer for them to get... The final mission is you walking in a straight line. I spent a huge... Oh, come on, guys, no kills. The entire main... You're basically a camera with legs who watches a story. They're just playing... But bear with me here. Games, especially... But if someone invited you...
This argument, yeah. He doesn't go on. Jon definitely straw man's sort of a really long straw man of the story of Fallout. You could call both of them just dumbed down versions. Jon used the dumbed down version of Hbomberguy's dumbed down version of Fallout 3's story. You could call them both straw mans. So that's my assessment of that. Let's just
story boiling down to, and I quote, "You're still following this one guy's trail." Again, I find this an odd criticism because I've never seen anyone hate on New Vegas' first act, even though it's pretty much exactly the same. You spend the first act trying to track down one guy who you can run straight to if you know where you're going and how to get there, but most players will be following the road from clue to clue, running into major characters and factions on the way. Weirdly, Hbomberguy's video even takes a moment to call out the GNR, where you can choose to skip a quest if you can pass a skill check, thereby missing out on content, as if the exact same thing didn't happen in Novak.
Okay. This sounds like this is correct. Okay, I don't like this comparison completely. I think it's moot point. But that's just my personal opinion on this. Yeah, as I said, Sacred G, New Vegas, Fallout 3. Those are the only two I want to say right now.
Where the entirety of the retcon test site can be skipped by just breaking into a single terminal in the motel. But let's move on to a higher view of the plot, because unquestionably, Fallout 3 post-Tranquility Lane is weaker than Fallout New Vegas post.
Yes, Fallout 3 is weaker. Tranquility Lane is quite good. Good is probably not the word I should use. Interesting is definitely a really... It really diverges from anything in the previous two Fallout games, the virtual reality unit.
Benny, but I've never been convinced that comparing main plot to main plot is a fair comparison, and I'm going to prove that to you right now with maps. So let's have a quick...
Yeah, Jon falls in the same trap. He's really trying to counter Hbomberguy way too much with some of the same quirky, zany humor. Definitely a flaw in his analysis. Okay, let's see how this guy, Cretios, goes on with this.
As the first act in New Vegas. However, there's a far bigger issue here, and this is the point where I actually have to stop the video and talk about it, and that's the extremely dishonest
I have to think about it. It's definitely where this comment came from. 3 times is a pattern. Okay, so
onto other people here. Once could be an accident, twice a coincidence, but 3 times is a pattern.
oh, the dude's quote is directly quoted from this video. It's freaking ridiculous.
With Indigo Gaming, he took his quote out of context and responded to it in such a way that was convenient to debunk the out of context quote.
No, he agreed with the main. He sort of agreed with the criticism, but he sort of sidestepped it and sort of pulled a whataboutism. Okay, it's a whataboutism is a common thing for amateur arguers. I mean, so is a straw man argument. Simplify. Steel man's a little bit harder to pull off because you have to contribute a lot of good faith. I don't know if Jon really applies good faith to his Fallout 3 is better, but it's a defense video. And he probably steelmans a lot of points about Fallout 3, which I will admit to.
He additionally strawmanned Indigo by adding in the issue of realism, which was not something Indigo mentioned.
That was a totally separate argument. I mean, I'll grant Creed this point. You could consider his sort of his whataboutism as a straw man. I do not believe it to be a straw man. But yeah, you could look at it that way. It is a very simplified version of that. Not saying Creed does not straw man everything else. Okay, all these fallacies I'm not even claiming that Creed is being necessarily dishonest. I'm saying he's arguing in bad faith. There is a difference between dishonesty and arguing in bad faith.
And further applied it to an entirely different part of the game.
See, this is what I don't agree. The Paradise Falls argument. Rescue quest if you can't pass the skill check. That is just a fact. So considering Rescue from Paradise a completely different part of the game, I think is really nitpicky and distorting the truth. This is one point I can't agree with Creed on. I skipped most of this section because, yeah, Jon is definitely have flawed logic here. Everyone skips over those 2 games. They're the black sheep of the classic Fallout fans, the Tactics and Brotherhood of Steel. The black sheep, they don't exist, yada yada yada. But, yeah, I'm on wrong video. So, this point, I don't agree with. This, I can understand, the straw manning, I can understand, but I believe it was more whataboutism. But, you know, good faith argumentation, you gotta grant some good faith in there and say, yeah, it could definitely be considered straw man and Indigo. Issue of realism, as I said, probably a whataboutism and not a straw man there.
In order to debunk it, with Hbomb criticizing Autumn as a villain, he again took an out-of-context quote and left the substance of what Hbomb was saying out, and singled out the line that Autumn is just some guy that is talked down and leaves. Which Jon then used as a whataboutism fallacy to complain about Lanius.
Oh, I'm glad Creed was actually able to identify this. I can agree with him completely. Yes, it is a whataboutism fallacy to talk about that. Or, yeah. Okay.
And completely ignored the entire criticism Hbomb was actually making. Now, Jon takes Hbomb out of context again and ignores the substance of what he's saying, focusing on the line about following one guy while completely ignoring the fact.
Okay, following one guy.
The Hbomb's criticism is all about how Fallout 3 leads you around by the nose and never really makes you think about any difficult choices.
That I can object to. Never makes you think about any difficult choices, cause Hbomberguy, that was a straw man. My assessment is Jon, straw man to straw man, or a simplified version.
And Hbomb is additionally criticizing how overly simplistic most of the main story is.
Yes, that was the straw man. Most of the story is.
Go to a guy who tells you to go to a guy who tells you to go to a girl who tells you to go to a holotape that tells you to go to a dungeon.
And Creed strawmans it again. I meant, really, this is just a mess. I don't have to agree with Creed here, but he's definitely, that one point about Indigo Gaming is definitely a weak point in this.
There's nothing to really figure out for yourself. It's just a sequence of mindlessly following orders for a large portion of the game.
And how is that different than any other game? First game, you're ordered to get the chip. I guess the defense would be that you decide how to get the chip. You could say the same for how you get your father. It's probably it's a lot more linear, and you do have less choices, but it's a more complex game with more factors to take into account. People who criticize this does not take in the fact that there's a lot more data and programming needed for Fallout 3. Just look at the data requirements and figure out how much more time freaking... I don't like Strawman Sacred G. I really don't. I would rather Steelman most points. I wish I could even Steelman Kratos' points, but they're just so petty. They're just... Yeah, they're nitpicky. His rhetorical strategy is just a beat. It's just volume. I mean, you can't do it. I understand, just throw out what you think are facts, but most of what he throws out ain't freaking facts.
Even after Vault 112, the main story remains simplistic, with the only major choices being good versus extreme evil options.
Again, this is a straw man. I'm going to have to try to address this issue as well as I can. I don't agree with this particular criticism, but how to prove against this criticism, a little bit not difficult, but it's difficult. Creed obviously has a freaking black or white thinking on this issue. It's either extreme evil or extreme good. There's not much nuance. I would like to see his example of a nuance discussion, but that's just me. Hbomberguy's comments add to this was... We'll just do...
And again, Jon recontextualizes Hbomb's comment and adds shit to it that was never there in the first.
What does he... What does he add to it? Please tell me.
Place.
To revisit Hbomberguy's well-known critique, he dislikes how you move around the game world, running into major players and factions as you go, walking from clue to clue, the overarching story boiling down to, and I quote, "You're still following this one guy's trail."
That wasn't actually the criticism Hbomb had made against the game. This is something Jon invented entirely to counter what Hbomb had said.
No, it's a simplified, dumbed-down version of Hbomberguy's simple, dumbed-down explanation of Fallout 3 storyline. Everything's just so simple. I can't agree with any of it. But when dealing with simple things, you don't want it.
Dead. Or in other words, he's strawmanning him. So here we have 3 examples of Jon responding.
Yes, and I proved you've strawman Jon several times because of his vagueness. And yeah, it's right to criticize the video for his vagueness. Asking him for more detailed or trying to find a good faith argument here. Good faith steelman for this. And I cannot. Okay, I understand his confusion. Let's try to steelman this. I don't think I can, actually.
To take. Still, that's just the script. What most people want to talk about is the plot. I've never fully understood the hate here either. At a high level, as I discussed earlier.
Okay, he doesn't understand. This is a lack of understanding. At a high level...
Key information about the world is unveiled as it becomes relevant, slowly expanding the story from a personal one into one where you're a key figure that deals with major factions.
Okay. Key figure that deals with major factions. A little out of it, but it's acceptable. That's sort of how it goes in all these games. You get more involved in the world. This is really something that can apply to each one of the games.
Which strikes me as somewhat similar to New Vegas' structure.
Yeah, well, I have no clue about Creed listening to it. He definitely did do a flood of information to try to counter Jon's simplified version, or strawman if you want to consider it. As I've considered many points, I can't actually call it a strawman. It definitely could fit. Creed, what he's doing earlier in the game with the mole rats, that's definitely a strawman. This could be considered. This is more baseline. I can't see any clear intent. But I can't steelman this argument either.
Structure of hunting down the chip in Act 1, and through your actions in that hunt, coming to the attention of major players in the world who therefore want to deal with you going forward. But some people seem to have a real issue with the structure of Act 1 in Fallout 3. The story of leaving the vault and tracking down your dad.
See, there is nothing wrong with this argument right here. Trying to actually apply this argument to Hbomberguy's video, it's extremely sloppy.
To revisit Hbomberguy's well-known critique, he dislikes how you move around the game world, running into major players and factions as you go, walking from clue to clue, the overarching story boiling down to, and I quote, "You're still following this one guy's trail." Again, I find that...
Yeah, I couldn't find that quote. He must have simplified his argument because Hbomberguy strung it out over a long period. Why Steelman in Fallout 1 storyline and Strawman in Fallout 3 storyline.
It's an odd criticism because I've never seen anyone hate on New Vegas' first act, even though it's pretty much exactly the same.
See, there's a slight thing. It's not exactly the same. It is very similar in design. It's a simplification, but since it's sort of a simplification on both sides of the equation, I don't have a problem with that. If you try to hype up or steelman the storyline of Fallout 3, then kept Fallout New Vegas weaker, it would be a problem. But I see no problems in this particular part.
You spend the first act trying to track down one guy who you can run straight to if you know where you're going and how to get there, but most players will be following the road from clue to clue, running into major characters and factions on the way. Weirdly...
Yes, that is correct. And here's the problem with Jon's video. Weirdly,
Hbomberguy's video even takes a moment to call out the GNR, where you can choose to skip a quest if you can pass a skill check, thereby missing out on content, as if the exact same thing didn't happen in Novak, where the entirety of the retcon test site can be skipped by just breaking into a single terminal in the motel.
So, if I had to guess, I would guess John sloppily brought Hbomberguy's video up to sort of, not because it's applicable in the scenario, but because he wanted to bring up this quote and make the comparison between Fallout New Vegas and Fallout 3. That would be my best guess on that. And that would be Steelman in it. I see no problem with this comparison here in the state. I don't like it, but no problem with it.
But let's move on to a higher view of the plot, because unquestionably, Fallout 3 post-Tranquility Lane is weaker than Fallout New Vegas post-Benny.
Okay, something that I think Kurtosis runs over.
Responding directly to points from other people's videos, and all 3 times he takes quotes out of context, leaves out the important information and the substance of what they were saying, just to respond to an extremely cherry-picked.
And you add in a bunch of context so you can pretty much distort. Most of your straw men are freaking nine straw men. They're jelly men. They're Frankenstein straw men of some sort of distorted. John does its simplification. Yeah, it could be considered a straw man, but nowhere comparison to the straw men you construct.
Line, and even then, he goes above and beyond to twist what was said or apply it to different parts of the game than what Hbomb and Indigo.
For Hbomberguy, I will have to partially agree. For Indigo Gaming, it's a whataboutism, and you're incorrect there. Because of your strict definitions. Very strictness.
Indigo we're referring to. Not to mention the logical fallacies he uses, such as false equivalence or whataboutism or strawmanning. Straight up inventing arguments that were never made in order to counter them.
Oh, this is definitely blowing this John's points up to a extreme degree. He definitely does have a lot of confusing arguments, but you're doing deceptive. I cannot detect actual bad faith. He tries to entertain points, then he plays dumb. His playing dumb does get a little problematic, but that's besides the point. This is why I've skipped some areas. I don't care about criticizing John or Miniature Nerd, no matter what you call him. But this is definitely what his case has been building up to, and frankly, I think it's overblown.
All of this paints a pretty clear picture that John...
See, my problem with this is John is not going to acknowledge the faults of the critics of Fallout 3. He's just going to acknowledge the defender of Fallout 3. The same crappy-ass double standard that pretty much can be found in almost any of his videos. Double standards. Rules for me, not for thee. You criticize Fallout 3 and you're perfect. Every argument you and I, Kurtosis, is perfect and cannot be argued with. John and anyone who defends Fallout 3 is wrong. They're straw manning. They're distorted. I admit it. I try to admit where John's video is flawed. But I'm trying to act in good faith. Or at least my distorted version of it. It might not be up to their standards. See, reality is almost subjective in a way. You have such a strong desire. Kurtosis could very well not realize that he is being the disingenuous one. He is being dishonest. So when you step up to be more dishonest to try to beat someone who's only slightly dishonest, that is not improvement. He has a certain point here, but still, he has a point here, but all the gaslighting in other places really are some crap-tastic argumentation, and it's malicious. He's trying to paint him as someone purposely trying to be dishonest. I will agree. Jon's argument is deceptive in its framing, but purposely dishonest, I can't establish that. There's just too little to go off of. I can establish it with this video.
Jon is responding in bad faith. That he's not looking at the actual criticisms that are being made, but that he's taking something else away from them entirely and responding to that instead.
Oh, he has a different opinion than you. That is what it boils down to. He is very confused about the criticisms because Hbomberguy was extremely confusing and extremely bad. I don't even know if I would say Hbomberguy's video was bad faith. It was pretty deceptive in its methodology. But to say that's bad faith, yeah, I would overall. Why is everyone using bad faith to counter bad faith? Okay, it just creates this cycle of this bad faith cycle that makes every generation, frankly, if I did an assessment of this probably would come off less bad faith than this one. Because Jon acknowledged that Fallout New Vegas has better qualities. Hbomberguy does not acknowledge Fallout 3 has better qualities than any other Fallout games. Doesn't that seem unbalanced? Jon makes the case that Fallout 3 has places it has strengths in and has places it's weakness in. That seems a little more balanced to me. His argumentation is some complete dog shit, including a lot of simplification that could be considered strawman and a lot of whataboutism. Both of them are common tactics. So I don't think he's thinking in a more objective, critical way as some people. No clue about that. Hbomberguy probably was trying to construct a very convoluted argument against Fallout 3, in my personal opinion. Just like his defense of Dark Souls 2 was extremely convoluted. Probably actually have to cover that one time. But yeah. I'll partially agree with Cree here. I think he needs to establish a tent for why Jon is being bad faith and why he himself is not being bad faith. Bad faith takes more than just fallacies to establish. You sort of need to have a sort of harping, a sort of narrative that's strictly defined that is almost insulting to other people. Jon definitely tries to frame, maybe that's his problem. He tries to have kid gloves with these other critics. He doesn't want to actually call their actual arguments garbage. Like, he might have to, or point out the flaws. This is the problem with positive criticism. You dance around the actual you don't want to say the actual criticism is dog shit. But that's the best good faith. I personally don't see the bad faith in this video because this just makes the error that a lot of these critics who, of course, personal game and all. Let's see about this.
It is absurdly fucking dishonest to argue in this fashion.
Yeah, the same can apply to you. You just start up, ramp up, and just keep doing it. You're a hypocrite, Kratos, okay? you have anger issues. I see the same thing in your video as you see in Jon's video, and the fact you can't see how dishonest Hbomberguy's video and even that particular section of Fallout isn't Fallout anymore by Indigo Gaming. You can't see the flaws in that means you're extremely one-sided minded. I can see the flaws in both perspectives, okay? And I'm probably biased towards a Fallout, someone defending Fallout. I will recognize my bias. You, I don't think you will. You, see, this is decent enough. I think it's overhyped, overblown.
Because it's easy to take select quotes and do whatever the fuck you want with them. As Jon has done 3 times now in this video, and respond to that instead of what was actually said.
Oh, is Kurtosis mad that people aren't taking these criticisms seriously? Because, frankly, both of those videos are rather weak argumentation. Yeah, Jon addressed them weakly himself. As I said, that's the flaw of trying to tiptoe around criticisms. You get whataboutisms. You get all this. You're not trying to weakly go after this. I haven't addressed this in my video. I guess I will have to by the end. And I will have to partially agree with Kurtosis. But there's other points in the video that I think... projection. Okay. There's no way to know if Jon was bad faith for his Fallout isn't better than you think.
This is why in my responses, I play large blocks of the video I'm responding to, so those watching can see for themselves what's being said exactly, and what the response to that is.
Oh, no, you do it to overflow. Okay, you might have a part of that. Yeah. Sure thing, Sacred G. Everyone needs to learn more, and everyone needs to try to deal with things directly. I can't argue. Yeah, I can argue directly with this is context. Let's listen.
Because the context is what matters. Now this brings...
Yes, but when you don't apply the context in the correct fashion, it can be distorted.
...to literally everything else he's responding to into question as well, as his entire video is a defense video. He's defending the game from much of the criticism it has received, but he's not plainly referencing any actual articles or videos that his audience can see.
Yes, it's the wishy-washy video essayist mentality of the let's not hurt anyone's feelings. We have to try to gently just sidestep all the criticism so we can make our point. Not just going to say it's just dog shit argumentation and shit like that. Okay.
He's just framing the criticisms on his own, which allows him to present them in literally any way he wants. So if he's going to dishonestly respond to other YouTubers, why wouldn't he do it with these other criticisms as well? In fact, I have examples of it earlier in the video.
Now this is where I start getting a tiny bit confused, because the criticism I see over and over about Fallout 3 is there's no freedom, there's no choice, there are no skill check resolutions, there's no opportunity to roleplay. But Fallout 3's tutorial section seems to be trying to provide exactly that. Now, I agree.
Oh, he's gonna do a greatest hits. Very nice. No freedom, no choices, no skill checks. Yeah, dog shit argumentation, personally. There is freedom, there is choices. Jon is sort of straw man in the criticism. I will agree with this. He's simplifying it. Well, no, some people actually make this argument. And it's ridiculous. You should not actually entertain ridiculous criticisms, in my personal opinion. You need to try to flesh it out. The problem is Fallout 3 does not have enough choices, enough freedom. But my question is, what is enough? it's impossible to actually get a metric guide. People use the sort of quantity approach, comparison, raw numbers, but raw numbers, take a look at the data that it takes to download Fallout 1. Compare that to the data Fallout 3 takes on a hard drive. There's raw numbers right there. A lot more data, a lot more work being done. Yeah, Bethesda's notorious for having buggy stuff, but they try to keep it open source, so modders. Is it good? Is it bad? I am not one to judge on that particular front.
It's unrealistic that if you shoot children, they don't die. The thing is, no game will...
Yes, it is unrealistic. That is the truth. It sort of is one of the criticisms. Okay, they want the ability to do anything they want. They are just pretty much... Okay, they pretty much just want total chaos and freedom. They're not realist. The way you I mean, John almost had a good argument when he was talking about the realism and the real world real world consequences. Tim Kaine actually brings up that Fallout 1 or 2 got banned in the UK, either in Europe, probably both. Probably Australia automatically, but someplace in Europe because there was a shooting, so being able to kill children, was Fallout 1. So for Fallout 2, they just took the children out, which sort of reduces the realism.
Of course, the only reason child murder actually ever gets brought up at all is because Fallout 1 lets you do it.
Well, lucky you. Unknown. I played New Vegas when it first came out, and there was some game-breaking bugs when Fallout New Vegas came out. They got to just states where you couldn't play it anymore. I'll drop through the floor. They patched that stuff after... I don't know how long it took. It's been too long since I played it. But yeah, there was game-breaking bugs in Fallout New Vegas. I can say that from first-hand experience.
Do it. Oh, and what happens when an outside power discovers the location of their vault? Why, the lone wanderer heads straight there and murders everyone inside it. In Fallout...
Okay, what's this? He really does this greatest...
Bending. Now you can't... So, you've basically led a man to his death in order to rescue it.
This is dog shit argumentation. All this.
Interesting, because what the devs choose to tutorialize...
And I believe I should have the skill to... Can I activate this? Yes, I can repair the...
Yes, this is not... This is not part of the tutorial. I didn't want to do it because his stupid... John's argument's stupid for the introduction. The intro has a narrative and tutorial strength behind it.
And let's chemistry set. Yes, let's make some stim pack.
In order to shoot better, sneaking to get... But remember, Fallout 3 isn't a proper Fallout game because there aren't enough skill checks, choices, or alternative solutions. There demonstrably are, I just told you them.
Seeing the criticism honestly. And
How long is this? 8 hours. Okay.
There demonstrably are, I just told you them.
to me, this seems to prove that he was never interested in actually discussing the criticism honestly and figuring out what was.
Yeah. The criticism, honestly. Okay, you need to actually verify the criticism is accurate before. This is why he's confused. Most people are confused by some of the criticisms against Fallout 3. That is a fact. Some of these criticism, like even when I argue against Mr. Caption's freaking no food chain theory, I get pushback, and that's ridiculous to me. Mr. Caption's, God rest his internet off ass, but that was one of the most dogshit arguments I've seen. The no food chain theory is just something that is useless.
Or wasn't accurate.
Maybe I wouldn't be so hard on Cree if he actually didn't try to argue the food chain theory. He does. I mean, this is making a pretty good case why Jon's video is rather bad in some regards. He does not address the criticism against Fallout 3 to a decent degree, but you know what? I think that was his first video essayist. You're criticizing him for having bad arguments and assuming it's dishonest. What do you want him to do? Take it down? I mean, there's still a lot of good points brought up in it that critics don't want to address themselves.
He's here to defend the game from criticism. Damn the facts and context. At least this seems to explain why his video is so terrible and how I managed to make an 8-hour long response to it. Because there's just that much wrong with his arguments that
No, you have a lot of filler. You have a lot of unnecessary extra bits to sort of damnation him. You use a lot of theories to disprove his theories. About the only place you have any credibility is the fact that Jon does not want to address these criticisms. Okay, yep. You definitely made an argument. He sort of sidesteps a lot of the, in my personal opinion, a lot of the more bad faith criticisms. Maybe that's why he doesn't understand them. He doesn't, because Hbomberguy, as much as a lot of people, he made a really good argument that sounded good in theory, but there was a lot of strawmanning in that video. It definitely was a freaking issue.
required this long to deconstruct them all with shown examples and facts. It is much easier to put
With facts. No. None of this is based around facts. This is based around believing these criticisms have validity and being mad at Jon for not addressing them directly. Yeah. Whataboutisms, simplifications of the criticism, steelmans of some of the issues critics have with Fallout 3. Okay. Maybe it is good if I just do a full defense video myself for Fallout 3. Who knows?
put out something short when you are making things up, ignoring facts and context in order to defend something at any cost. Anyways, back.
There's a lot of repetition going on. Illusionary truth line sort of comes into play. I mean, there is a lot of gaslighting in here, not partially with Jon's video. He has some points. I will admit Creed has some good points. They're very black and white thinking. It's either totally dishonest or totally honest. It's really just all or nothing. You can't have a sort of decent gray. He shows that with his moral system. Look at how often he butchers the NPCs.
Back to the video. This really just gives the impression that Jon is only looking at the absolute surface level aspect to the story, starting with you pursuing someone.
Oh, that is load. You're looking at the surface level. You're not seeing the problems with the criticisms because you agree with the criticism. You're not critical of the criticisms. I'm trying to be as critical as I can with the criticisms. That's the point of this, seeing the flaws of the criticism. I'm taking good faith approach because Jon's on the defense for this game, so that's just my particular tactic for this series, because Jon cannot argue very well. He has a lot of good ideas, he's very passionate, and he definitely comes up with a lot of good points, but they're buried behind weak argumentation against criticism. Jon's never going to be a good critic. I think he should accept that.
Someone. Because to say they're pretty much exactly the same in the first act is a bit fucking absurd.
What?
that Jon is only looking at the absolute surface level aspect to the story, starting with you pursuing someone. Because to say they're pretty much exactly the same in the first act is a bit fucking absurd. It's pretty clear that New Vegas has a lot more going on in general, whereas Fallout 3 barely has a plot.
See, this is a simplification of Fallout 3. You're not even going to explain. You're not going to give a good faith interpretation of Fallout 3. You're just going to skim over the surface of Fallout 3 because you don't like Bethesda. Freaking hell. No one can see their blind spot, or is he just pandering to people? People who want audiences will be like, oh, these people like this and that. Let me suck up to this person. Freaking people who suck up to certain communities and just toe the party line freaking annoy me.
It's more akin to a list of plot points that are barely expanded upon. I also already covered how meeting groups in the two games aren't anywhere.
No, he did not. Absolutely. I was waiting a bit. He did not qualify why Fallout New Vegas was so much more better than the story. Of course he didn't cover it. He does the same exact thing as all these freaking critics. Okay? I started this journey to try to figure out the right way to criticize things. This is not the right way. Hbomberguy is not the right way. Ooh, Mr. Caption, I don't know. It's definitely not the right way, but it's definitely closer to good faith and honest, get to the heart of the matter criticism.
We're close to the same, so I won't repeat that here. Literally half of the entire main quest line is finding Liam Neeson, or doing chores for him at Project Purity. The main quest line literally only has 12.
Okay, here's the numbers. 1 is skippable, 2 others don't qualify. Yep.
Completion. Let's go through every single one of them. Escape covers the entire section where you escape from the vault, where you kill or evade.
You're criticizing Jon for the same exact thing you're doing. The hypocrisy of this.
Galaxy News Radio has you do a dungeon full of generic enemies to get an item to repair the radio. Alternatively, this could be skipped with a speech check. Scientific and a clue there directs you to Vault 112. Tranquility Lane has you tormenting people at Braun's direction, or activating the failsafe to put the residents out of their misery.
Kratos does not understand in writing or emotional impact. He's not factoring any of this in. At least Hbomberguy showed some freaking emotional attachment to at least Fallout 1. Creed is not applying any understanding. He seems to be appealing to the emotions of the fans, but he's not really making a case for why the fans were so attached. At least Hbomberguy made that. Hbomberguy's video, so much well made. I mean, it was problematic as all hell with some freaking fallacies that I really didn't point out, because in my videos I try to match the flow of each one of the videos. I'm trying to get to the 6-hour marker so I can have this section covered.
Trapping Braun forever, and allowing both the player and Liam Neeson to escape. Purity of anything living inside if you haven't done so already, then do some chores for Liam Neeson until the Enclave shows up and takes over, at which point you have to do a dungeon to escape. Picking up the trail has you reading a term. This quest only ends once you enter Vault 87. Rescue from Paradise is the optional quest mentioned earlier. It can be done in isolation of the main quest or skipped entirely. It's a quest
about rescuing children slaves from Paradise Fall, finding the Garden of Eden, literally just doing the dungeon to get the quest. How's this not a simplification or a straw man? Please tell me that.
Doing a dungeon to talk to an NPC. Take It Back is literally just following Liberty Prime's Death March. Finally, Project Impurity, which isn't even a proper quest. Quite literally, most of these quests barely have anything to them.
That's because you're strawmanning them and stripping them of any emotional narrative or character weight. When you don't have any attachment to any characters, it's hard to actually get involved. Okay, not gonna say it. Definitely comes off at a certain motif, and I'm to a good point. Totally missed it. Well, thank you guys who joined me. Hope you have a good night. This definitely started off badly and didn't turn out too well. I had to bite the bullet and say Jon had some problems with the section of the video, but the only real defense is that the other critics could be considered worse. I'm not going to be the judge of which straw man or which whataboutism or which false equivalency is the worst. It's all bad if you want to ask me. The narrative, the goal of Fallout 3 isn't better so far. Has just been complete dog shit, complete gaslighting. I mean, if it was just of Jon and he took out some of the dog shit arguments like the new food chain theory, I would be a lot more accepting of this video if he didn't do so much pragmatic shit. But I covered enough for tonight. I covered the criticism. Yeah, Jon's video is a problem, but two wrongs don't make a right. It's about degree, and Jon's video is about 2 hours of, I would rate about 30 to 40% of dog shit arguments. I would probably tell him nice. You have some problem with your argumentation, you know. It's to be understood. This hour and a half, I would say about 70% dog shit. Maybe less. I'm probably biased against it. Let's say it's 50-50. This one, okay, this section has a point. Overstate its welcome, and it's 8 hours. So let's say maybe 1 hour of it I would have to do a full breakdown, but I don't even think 1 hour of this is well done, or not done into such a freaking psychopathic degree that it isn't just overkill and horrible optics. Unless you hate Fallout, Bethesda Fallout, then people will love you for just railing on the only one who tried to defend Fallout 3. Only popular video to try to defend Fallout 3. But that's it. Have a good night. Take care.